In the annals of American criminal justice, few cases have sparked as much controversy and debate as that of the youngest American citizen ever sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. What was this tender 13-year-old's charge? What happened to this young boy to be able to commit such a heavy crime? Lionel Alexander Tate was born on January 30th, 1987, in Broward County, Florida. His early years were marked by instability and challenges. Described as an intelligent boy with average IQ and street smarts, Lionel also had a troubling history of behavioral problems. Before the incident with Tiffany, Lionel had been suspended from school 15 times and exhibited a pattern of lying, stealing, and fighting. His mother, Kathleen Grosset Tate, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper and a U.S. Army reservist, struggled to manage his behavior, perhaps even contributing to it, as while there is no evidence to support physical abuse, Lionel's history of violence must have come from an intimate source at an early age. On July 28, 1999, Kathleen was asked to babysit Tiffany Eunick, the daughter of a close family friend who'd grown up with her in Jamaica. That evening, Kathleen left Lionel and Tiffany alone while she went upstairs to rest. She'd later heard commotion, but only told them to quiet down, even threatening to beat your little butt towards Tiffany after Lionel blamed her for the ruckus. However, about 45 minutes later, Lionel came to tell his mother that Tiffany wasn't breathing. The little girl was found with severe injuries, including a fractured skull, lacerated liver, fractured rib, swollen brain, and multiple bruises. These injuries were so severe that they were comparable to those sustained from a fall from a 3-story building. What was Lionel's defense? He claimed that he was wrestling with Tiffany, imitating moves he had seen on television when she accidentally hit her head on a table. He described putting her in a headlock and then going back to watch TV while she lay on the floor, crying and urinating in her pants. By the time he called for his mother, Tiffany was already cold to the touch. The extent of Tiffany's injuries painted a grim picture. A child abuse expert testified that the beating lasted approximately 5 minutes and was delivered with such force that it was inconceivable as an accident. The prosecution argued that Lionel's actions were not those of a playful child, but were cold, callous, and indescribably cruel. What's worse, even in the case where such playfighting was believable, Lionel was twice Tiffany's age, 3 times her size, and 10-fold times her own strength. In other words, no matter the situation, their fighting never should have occurred at all. In 2001, Lionel Tate was tried as an adult for first-degree murder under Florida's felony murder rule, which mandates a conviction for any intentional act that results in a child's death, regardless of intent to kill. Despite his young age, Lionel was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The judge, Joel T. Lazarus, emphasized the brutality of the act, stating that it was beyond mere childish play. The sentence was met with widespread criticism. Many argued that convicting a 13-year-old to life imprisonment without proving intent was unjust. Critics pointed out that Lionel's mental competency had not been evaluated before the trial, a factor that contributed to the eventual overturning of his conviction in 2004. The appeals court ruled that Lionel had not been given a fair trial, leading to his release under a plea deal for second-degree murder. He was placed on 1 year's house arrest and 10 years probation. Sadly for Lionel, this plea deal and second chance wouldn't last long. Shortly upon release, his probation increased to 15 years when he was found outside his home, brandishing a knife. Then, not long after this extension, he was found at a friend's apartment, wherein he would call in a pizza from Domino's and attempt an armed robbery with a firearm toward the pizza delivery driver. The resulting incident caused Lionel to be convicted of violating parole and attempted armed robbery, thus returning him to prison for the next 30 years in 2008, where he sits to this day awaiting eligible release in 2031. Understanding why Lionel committed such a horrific act requires a deep examination of his psychological and social environment. Lionel's history of violence and behavioral problems suggests underlying issues that were not adequately addressed. Some experts argue that his actions were influenced by exposure to violent media and a lack of proper supervision and discipline. The defense's argument that Lionel was mimicking wrestling moves reflects a potential disconnect between understanding reality and fiction. Kathleen Tate's role in this tragedy also cannot be overlooked. As a law enforcement officer and a mother, she bore a significant responsibility for the children's well-being, especially given that the victim was another woman's child. Her decision to leave her historically violent, troubled child alone with a vulnerable 6-year-old raises serious questions about her judgment and awareness. Kathleen's dismissal of the children's noise and her failure to intervene sooner were critical lapses that significantly contributed to Tiffany's death. Furthermore, Kathleen's handling of Lionel's legal defense was controversial. She rejected a plea deal that would have resulted in a lesser sentence, opting instead to fight the charges in hopes of an acquittal. This decision, while perhaps driven by a desire to protect her son, ultimately led to a harsher outcome. During Lionel's later legal troubles, Kathleen's involvement or lack thereof came under scrutiny. Accusations of negligence, both in the original incident and in subsequent events, highlighted a pattern of poor decision-making. Whether due to denial, ignorance, or a misguided belief in her son's innocence, Kathleen's actions significantly impacted the course of Lionel's life and brought accusations of a mother who had given up on her own son. The case of Lionel Tate raises profound ethical questions about juvenile justice and parental responsibility. Should a child as young as 13 be held to the same standards of accountability as an adult? Does the justice system adequately address the developmental and psychological differences between children and adults? Lionel Tate's story, therefore, remains a case for early intervention and support for at-risk youth. His behavioral issues were well documented, yet effective measures to address them were lacking. This failure highlights systemic gaps in how society handles troubled children, often resorting to punitive measures rather than preventive ones. If you thought this story was shocking, stay tuned for our next tale about a young boy who committed a horrifying act of violence against his half-brother. This atrocious case delves deeper into the dark and complex world of childhood violence and legal battles that will leave you chilled to the bone. But beware, this story is only for the bravest of viewers. Subscribe only if you dare.